Basically, my name is Evgeniy Pirogov. I work at Nomorek, which is a company like that runs this huge, enormous store, something in the middle of like eBay and Amazon, I guess. But a year from now, I was working in a consultancy company, and I had this situation in a project where we basically did not deliver a huge feature that we were asked for to deliver. And it turned out to be entirely the communication problem. It wasn't the problem in a code or anything like that. And so I'm gonna tell you the story. But first of all, I have a confession to make. I suck at communicating, like badly. I cannot talk really well. I'm that kind of programmer who basically starts to write a lot of code as soon as he understands the problem. I basically just start to write a lot of code, tests, and try to deliver it as fast as possible. So here's my story. The project I was working on looked like this. And it was super simple. And I'm showing this scheme particularly because this is what I think a lot of projects in the world look like. We have an input data, have some computational layer, and we have to output the data somewhere, like save it to the database or send it to the third-party API. So it's super simple. But of course, a lot of you will say, well, if software would be that simple, well, it couldn't be this simple. And of course, the computation, at least if we take the computation part, it has a lot of details, enormous amount of business logic and stuff. And so, you have to deal with it, you have to understand what's going on. But the reason why I'm telling you this is because just to show you that the big picture behind the software is that the software is not as complex, the big picture is not complex at all. So if you think programming is hard, just go read the book, or go read it 5 times if you don't get it. I know people who literally read books for 5 times before really understanding what's going on. And it helps, actually. So, or read 10 books, whatever. So I even have this tweet by Evan Phoenix who said that the programming is only 5% of typing. The rest is thinking, understanding, and I would put some percentage here about communication. So I believe communication is super hard, it's extremely hard, and you can only learn empirically by communicating and making mistakes while talking and discussing stuff. And so at some point in our project, the client comes and says, we need a new feature. It's a super common request. And he basically, if we go back and remember the schema, so he basically needs to output the data to another source, to another destination. Let's put it this way. It's super simple, of course. But then we start to look closer at what we have at our disposal, and it turns out that things are a bit more complex than we thought. Actually, there is no 3 components as we see them here. Actually, there is, the coupling is so tough, so bad, the code is so badly coupled that we basically have a thruple of code. The entire thing is so entangled that it's impossible to just write another module and say, well, let's output the data into this destination. So we start to think, and we realize that we need to refactor. We basically need to change a lot of stuff in our application just to be able to implement this tiny thing. And what happens next is, after a day or 2 of thinking, I'm not sure, I begin to write the code immediately, oh, I know what to do. So let's do this. And during the 2 months period, me and the client communicate, but it's worth mentioning that there is a team. Although team is working on different stuff, like bug fixes, I guess, and other related projects. Well, it's solely just me, the Skype, and the client. And so the three of us are working, like communicating, and I'm implementing something. And so what's going on here? So it's one man, in around 3 months, I submitted 3 big pull requests, and 3 of them got merged and reviewed to master. But still, zero of the new code is running in production because like we're waiting for the 3rd pull request. So we're starting to look at the 3rd pull request that I did, and it's kind of tough to review it. We're kind of start to think that it's too big, it's too huge, and we cannot just move on with it as in its current state. So we decided to split it, but we're short on time, so we kind of like have only 1 month of time. And now the entire team is working, and we have 1 more month of development. We decided to split the 3rd pull request into 3 parts. We merge some of that. The team gets insanely stressed out, and still 0 new code is running in production. Although all of the code has been merged to master branch. And those of you who deploy production from master, as did we, now understand that, well, it blocks the bug fixes to the production because a lot of new stuff is in the master. A lot of new stuff is in the master. So, but then goes this. The client says, the time's up, we cannot move on with this, and we have to stop the development of this particular feature and wrap up stuff as quick as possible. So what we do at this point, we basically just we reset the master prior to what was done to the prior 3 months, and try to wrap up, like to implement the new feature on top of the bad code that we had back then. And so here comes the not happy ending. The summary was this. The deadline wasn't met, the feature wasn't delivered. All the new code, like not all of the new code, but a lot of parts of the new code was deployed to production, only it was not facing the user. The code base is now a mess. Me was super stressed, almost quit, and the project is being put on no new features mode. So basically at this point I realized, well, hey, we have to stop. I mean, I have to quit. Basically, I cannot move on with this team because I lost the credibility. I was, like, everyone thought that I will make it, but suddenly, out of nowhere, this guy probably doesn't know what he's doing. So so I thought, I have to come to my CTO and tell him that I want to quit. And so I go to my CTO, and he is a wise man. He says, well, take a vacation. So I take a vacation and try to think about what happened. So I took a 2 weeks vacation, and I didn't even go anywhere. Like, I did not travel. I basically just wandered through the downtown in Kyiv because I was so fucked up. And I was thinking, well, how did that happen? How can I even move on with being a developer at all if I cannot, I mean, I knew what to do, I knew what the path is, but somehow it didn't work. I have the power to and the energy to accomplish my goal, but something went wrong. So I started to analyze, and I realized a few things. So the first thing was ridiculous pull requests. Well, this is the lesson that I've learned for probably my entire life, like my future life, is that you cannot submit pull requests that are hard to review. Reviews are basically blocked. If there are like 50 files in the change set in a pull request, you just cannot, like your team just can't review it. They just look through the diff, and then at some point while scrolling down, they just lose the track of what was going on above, and they cannot connect the things between each other, and basically everyone gets pissed. So yeah, everyone get irritated, and I get irritated, people get irritated because we need the feature, we need to deliver the feature, but somehow it's impossible to review the code, and no one knows what to do. And moving on, I found this website, which is called Epic Pull Requests, which collects these pull requests that are completely over the top. You can take a look at what it looks like. So the next reason is the lack of understanding what we are building. Basically, I was alone. I was, despite the fact that there was a team, I was alone who was building this entire thing. And so I didn't help other people to understand what we are building at all. And so to really understand what we are building, we would need to have at least some kind of record, some kind of thing to look at, some kind of documentation, or I don't know, some stuff. And so because of the communication was broken, I was basically using Skype and the client. There was no leftovers to look at what this guy was even working on. While someone is reviewing a pull request of mine, he just cannot understand what's going on because there are no documentation, no requirements. All of the requirements were left in the Skype chat. And Skype is clearly not the way to do it. I don't like this reason particularly, but I don't like to blame anyone for my mistakes, but I think there might have been a situation where I lacked the seniority. I mean, I could write the code, the complex code, a lot of code, but I needed some guidance, or at least someone who would come to me and say, well, you're doing something wrong, let's wrap it up and maybe do it differently. And the final reason is, of course, I has a dump. Yeah, it's pretty much self-explanatory, so I won't go into details here. So what are the lessons that we can take from these items? Basically, there are a few lessons. The first lesson, you cannot do everything alone. The thing that I would forgot is that I'm a team member. I'm not alone. I'm not a hero. I cannot implement stuff and expect everyone to just clap me and say, oh, Eugene, you're doing great, move on. So it's a team, and you have to behave like a team member by all costs. This is the best you can do. You have to turn the hero mode off, and even though you feel like the energy, the power, and you feel like you understand what's going on, if no one will review your code, basically your code will not get merged. So turn the hero mode off entirely. And after all, being like the single man who would know what's going on, it's a complete stress. I found it to be a complete stress. I literally couldn't sleep well. I started to have headaches and stuff like that, so this is not something you would want to have, absolutely. The second lesson is that, well, you have to remain on the record, always. And maybe when you're developing your gem, or you're working on your own startup or something, like it's a two-man company, or you don't have to do this, but if it's a big project, if it's a lot of people, you really have to record stuff. So you have to communicate in a shared space. I was communicating in a Skype, and I thought that, well, everything is cool. I mean, I can quickly get the feedback, but it turned out that when we started to look at the third pull request, there were not docs, and the Skype was so entangled, like there was so much communications going on, so much discussions, that I basically couldn't find and extract the exact pieces that I wanted to show to my teammates to explain them stuff that I was working on. So yeah, use GitHub. Commenting on GitHub is highly appreciated. Good commit messages, stories in Pivotal Tracker, and Campfire. Campfire is pure gold. And tools like Campfire, like Slack or similar, it's a pure gold. You can basically just go and search the entire history for the past 5 years and find stuff. It's really cool. Emails are cool, but in emails you have to like cite people, like carbon copy a lot of people, and oftentimes people just don't care about what the emails are about if they are not directly like mentioned in the first line or something. And yeah, fuck Skype. The reason is because, again, messages are on Skype tend to get lost. If I, for example, use my iPhone and my computer, basically the synchronization is somewhat broken, and again, Skype just doesn't work because Skype is a private chat, and you need something for everyone to be able to look at. And all of these three, you can quickly link, like send a link to someone and say, well, this was discussed there, and just take a look, and if you need any further help, I will help you. The lesson number 3 is that you have to take a step back. Whenever I was working with a client, he would say, I would like evaluate some idea with him, and he would say, oh, I need this and that and that and that, and I would build the whole like structure in my head to understand how to build the entire thing, and with time, this was like a snowball because client wanted a lot more, and I thought, well, the more information I get from him, the more context I get on the business, so the more generic code I can write. And I was completely drifted away by this kind of thinking. So you have to stay back because client oftentimes doesn't really know what he needs. It's super basic, but yeah, he just don't really, he have a problem, and your responsibility is just to understand the problem and not just come up with the first available solution in your head. So don't blindly go after a client's requests. And what even more is, I learned once that only fools write code first. And to read more about this statement, please refer to this link. It's actually about a different topic. It's about a guy who builds his own startup. But it has this blog post has a lot of good ideas of what kind of communication you should establish with your client. You have to like learn his language, understand him better, and not just blindly go after his requests. Lesson number 4 is to like learn to ask and accept feedback. This is pretty damn hard. So whenever you submit a pull request, you would expect that someone will look at it and say, oh, Eugene, you've done a great job, let's merge this. Well, no, this isn't how it's working. The pull requests are for other people to go hard on you, to like find stuff that you've done wrong and to fix them, to help you fix them. And whenever that happens, actually, like you have to take it gently and wisely because after all, you guys, like the entire team struggles to make a better product. So if someone says there is a mistake, it doesn't really bully you or it doesn't want to irritate you specifically. He just wants this piece of code to be much better than it is in its current state. So don't feel bad whenever someone comes to you. Both of you are working for the same team. Yeah, and so if other people disagree, it only means that they care. That's all. They don't want to harm you in any way. Just please remember this. Next lesson is that you are not your code. At some point, I myself would get attached to what I was working on. Like I would write some code, I would look for it for a few days, and I would think, oh, just look at it. It's so damn perfect. I'm super programmer. So whoever looks at this code, he should hit the merge button immediately. And so I would get attached to my code, and after a while, when someone says, well, this is incorrect, and this is bad, and this is that, and etc., I would get really upset. Just don't be drifted away by associating yourself with the code that you produce. It's basically separate things. You may be a good person, but you may produce a bad code, or otherwise it works, both sides. you may be a bad person who produces great code. So the lesson number 6 is about providing the information. So while I was the only one who would hold up the entire thing in my head, no one would help me. And so when it came to the point where I needed help, basically just no one could help me and fix this thing. So hopefully it will be merged and deployed to production. So why do I need to provide information? In which cases? For instance, in my case, when I was working on this huge thing, it would be much better if I would describe the entire ideas of mine to this, I don't know, Google Docs or just, and let everyone know about it, and ask for feedback from every developer who's around me, and maybe the CTO or maybe even the client. If only I've done that, and whenever we fail, I would secure myself, because it wouldn't be only my failure, it would become a shared failure. So I would be only a part of it, because the other people would be responsible for it as well, as I provided the information up front. Providing information means basically letting everyone else to do their best to help you. Otherwise, if you just don't provide information, if you don't communicate, you don't even give your teammates a chance to help you. They just leave with their own paths and so on. So just Google Docs are awesome. There are tons of examples. Specifically, I was interested in Go language, and those guys are extremely good at writing docs, like running the ideas before actually implementing something. So it's a lot of great examples on the internet. You could take a look. So yeah, the bottom line is write down the stuff and share it. Do not let other people down. This is probably one of the biggest lessons. So if I fail, for instance, I started to think, well, okay, I got stressed, but what else implications does my failure have? And so, yeah, I will pay literally by stressing out. But my team will probably will pay by turning it into a crunch mode, and they will stress out as well, which is never a good thing. And the client will pay just literally. We don't want our clients to pay more money. We want to save it. So let's just not let other people down. Talk today and not tomorrow. So there were several points in my 3 months journey where I could probably reach out to other people and say, well, I think I'm not going to make it. Well, something's going on here. I feel like it takes more time than it should have taken. At this point, I would think, well, I'm acting like not like a professional. I have to fight it myself. I have to sit and just fix it myself without even telling anyone. And so I would do that. But it turns out that that will not work. And this is when I realized that, well, maybe I have to talk today, because, you know, life is short. Let's talk right now. If I feel like I don't feel like talking, I can just leave a comment or something, but I need to provide people information right now, so hopefully they will make build out of that and do something to help me. Yeah, not finally, but I don't like to blame other people for my mistakes, although oftentimes it's easy to think that, well, it's an environment that will probably made you to make this mistake or something, but I once came across this article, and basically the author was writing a book, and he cut off the entire chapter from the book at some point when he realized that in the whole chapter he was blaming his employees for some kind of mistake that the company had or something like that. So you have to, all you can do is always just do your best. Just do the best of you, and which means specifically communication to other teammates. Yeah, this is the article I was referring to. You can take a look. It's really, really nice and enlightening. Lastly, well, it's actually a nice lesson. I guess it was the last one. Back when I was a child, my parents taught me that I should never fear to ask the teacher, because asking is not embarrassing. This isn't an act of showing that you don't know something. In fact, repeating the same mistake is embarrassing, because at least you had the chance to learn, but for some reason you did not want to learn, or you didn't realize a mistake, and this is what embarrassing. So you shouldn't fear to do the mistakes. After all, you know, life is a journey. Why fear doing stuff at all? Like, that's totally crazy. We have to do mistakes and help others understand stuff based on our mistakes, and move on and on and on. And if we don't do mistakes, probably I wouldn't stand here in front of you and tell everything. So yeah, repeating mistakes is not professional. Please do mistakes and learn from them. So again, experience is priceless. Even if it's a bad experience, you still get a feedback from an act of doing something. So yeah, the bottom line of the entire talk is pretty much just stop digging yourself a hole and learn to talk to people around you, to communicate, to gather feedback, etc. Lastly, I would like to suggest this great book. It's The Clean Coder. It's not about the code, although the title suggests a code word in it, but it's actually a story of life, at least this is how I find it to be, a story of life of a developer of Robert Martin, who basically describes a lot of pitfalls in his career, and he has a lot of examples of, like, you know, back in school, the dialogue between a manager and a programmer about how to do in certain situations while developing a project. So highly recommend it. It's a very enlightening book. I was suggested, like my CTO suggested to read me this one, and it's basically just opened up my eyes. That's it from me. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions, please reach out.